Okay, good morning. We'll call this meeting to order. You calling her own? Okay, okay. Like I said, we'll call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Senator Storm, Senator Turner,
Present.
Senator Wilson, Senator Yates, Representative Bridges, Representative Fugit,
Here.
Representative Heverin,
Present.
Representative Huff,
Present.
Representative McPherson,
Here.
Representative Pratt,
Here.
Representative Roberts, Representative Stevenson, Senator McDaniel, Representative Petrie, Representative Reed, Representative Upchurch,
Present.
Co-Chair Santoro, Chair Higdon.
Here. Thank you. Our first order of business today is Secretary Jim Gray. Welcome to the Budget Review Subcommittee on Transportation. And Mr. Secretary, if you would, just everyone in the room knows you, but for the record, please identify yourself. And I forgot one thing. I have a guest with me today. My grandson David is back in the back there, right behind Gay. So I wanted to welcome him here to the meeting today. He's going to tolerate me today, so y'all pass along your sympathy to him. After that interruption, Secretary Gray, please identify yourself for the record, and the floor is yours.
All right, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to everybody on the committee. And I always try to say when I'm before you all, thanks for your public service. We all appreciate that. The first item that you all asked me to speak about was the impact of inflation on the road fund. And I want to speak to that from my own experience, and as well as my own experience, what I see in the private sector, as well as, of course, or the public sector, as well as the private sector. So let me start by saying that I think we can all agree that these are extraordinary times.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know of anyone who was forecasting 8% inflation this time last year. As we all know, Governor Beshear has taken or attempted to take a number of steps to help Kentuckians who are struggling in this volatile and turbulent economy, including activating price gouging laws, trying vigorously to prevent a spike in tolls on the bridges in Louisville, and suspending an increase in motor vehicle property taxes, and also freezing a scheduled 2 cents per gallon increase in the state motor fuels tax. Now, I want to talk about the inflation and lettings that we've had in the cabinet, lettings that we're experiencing or anticipating soon, and what we're seeing. Inflation is affecting the cabinet's operations, not unexpectedly, as it is everything else. It makes it harder, more difficult to plan, and more difficult to budget. Now, as an example, we recently hosted an industry forum in Covington for prospective bidders for the Brent Spence Bridge, the corridor project. As you all know, it's about a $3 billion project. That's what our estimate has been. And we had contractors. I was pleased to see that there was a vigorous interest. We had contractors from around the country. In fact, there were nine individual contractors or joint venture teams. And a lot of companies are looking at the project as a joint venture. And that, frankly, is associated with the risk involved with the size of the project and the contractor community appetite for projects of this size in today's environment. Many of these contractors were saying that suppliers would guarantee prices for only 30 days. And that's one of the reasons that, and this is a acknowledgement to the legislature for years ago for giving the cabinet the flexibility to do projects on a design-build basis or progressive design-build basis, which gives us the flexibility to actually adjust and adapt in this environment. And at the cabinet, the Division of Construction Procurement, it sets the engineer's estimate for individual projects in Kentucky. It does that by trying to estimate a fair and reasonable price for the work items that will be required for any given project. Overall project costs have been on the rise, so it's been a moving target. Now, for example, the Kentucky Asphalt Price Index, which measures liquid tons, has increased by 46% in the first 7 months of the year. The indexed price was $525 in January, and today it's $768. That's a difference of $242 a liquid ton. At the same time, the Oil Price Information Service says a gallon of diesel has nearly doubled from $2.50 a gallon in January to $4.87 today. So not surprisingly, contractors factor those increases into their bids, or they factor the anxiety of the turbulence into their bids. So costs can change rapidly. For example, on March 24th, we led a major project, the March letting, on US 127. I know that many of you all know about that project. You've known about it for years. We let that project, part of which will take the highway off the Wolf Creek Dam. The cabinet received just one bid for that project of $105.2 million, and it was almost 17% above the engineer's estimate. So our awards committee declined that bid, rejected that bid, and relet the project on May 26th, the May letting. And reletting sometimes results in more competition the next time around. That's the hope or the expectation. Well, it did occur in this case. The cabinet received not one, but two responsive bids on the second try. The lower of the two was $105.4 million, or $200,000 more than the original offer. And it was from the same contractor that had earlier submitted the single bid of $105.2 million. The higher bid was $127 million, so a little bit better than $20 million higher. So the project was awarded to the lower bidder for about $200,000 more than the same company had bid 2 months earlier. Now, on many of our asphalt resurfacing and pavement rehabilitation projects, the awards committee has seen bids go up, not down, when a project is relet. Another example, the I-24 rehabilitation project in Christian County was let on April 28th. The cabinet received a single bid of $23 million, and it was also almost 17% above the engineer's estimate. Ordinarily, that bid might have been rejected and relet, but the decision was made, and you can appreciate this because of interests of public safety and the condition of the pavement, and in the interest of the public, of the traveling public, the awards committee decided to accept that bid. Now, I want to mention another area of concern, and everyone here is familiar with this too. That's supply shortages. There is a shortage of waterborne paint that we use for temporary and permanent striping, and that may cause some delays in our resurfacing program. It's been managed thus far, but there is anxiety associated with that as well. The cabinet has temporarily modified paint specifications to allow the use of a broader spectrum of colors, for example, a slightly different shade of yellow than what we might normally apply. There's also a shortage of cement. and extended lead times for waterline valves and some electrical components. This is true in the civil industry, it's true in the private sector, in the vertical world, and all of these have contributed to some project delays. Our Division of Construction continues to hear stories. We all hear stories about, not just stories, but we know that these issues are significant, and that is labor shortages and truck shortages as the main issue. So, while we have these conditions, I would say on balance, given the turbulence and given the volatility, that the road program is being managed efficiently and effectively. And let me wrap it up by noting that the Cabinet topped $1 billion in lettings in calendar 2021. That was up from about $800 million the previous year. And this year, lettings so far are just under $572 million. That's through May. And as it happens, our awards committee is meeting today to act on June lettings, on the June lettings. Now, we expect to continue a consistent level of lettings in calendar 22 with $1 billion of construction awards by year's end, and we are already halfway there. So, Mr. Chairman, that's my thoughts on inflation, the impact of inflation on the road fund. I guess if I had any more ability to prognosticate, I probably wouldn't be sitting here in front of you today. I'd be in another role that someone would expect more from me, but that's about as good as I can do today.
Mr. Secretary,
we'll take, if you want to take questions, I'm sorry.
Yes, we'll go ahead and take some questions now,
okay.
and before you get into the other things on the agenda. I guess, would you, if you don't mind, we hear about design build quite often.
Yeah.
It's not used a whole lot, but we hear the words design build. Would you kind of, I guess for all of us here, talk about the criteria for design build? Because not every project would qualify to be a design build. Right.
For better or worse, I guess, I'll preface it by saying that in a previous life in the private sector, I actually conceived of the idea of creating what is today the Design Build Institute of America. And the reason for that was there was no advocacy group for that type of procurement. And in the what's called in the civil world, I learned that anything above ground much is called vertical construction. So in the vertical world, design build has been around for some time, but its growth has occurred only in its real growth has occurred in the last 10, 15, 20 years. So my understanding is about 10 years ago, and Mr. Chairman, you might correct me on this because you were here, but the General Assembly approved a design build model for procurement, for delivery. And you are right, there are a number of criteria that would frankly more subjectively than objectively allow a project to go or be let on a design build basis. Now, when I say that, I mean that you have to take into account schedule, you have to take into account a competitive environment, you have to take into account the scope of the work, especially the scope of the work. How difficult is it to develop, for an engineer to develop, and our cabinet to develop a criteria set of documents that a contractor can actually bid on. And typically, the documents for design build will be about 30% complete. 30% as compared to when plans and specifications would be developed 100% complete so a contractor could bid on. So what this does, the design build does, is it requires the contractor to provide that 70% remaining engineering and develop the project to a sufficient level that the contractor can bid on the project and give a competitive and confident bid on the project. Now, often this allows us to get the project to letting earlier. If we develop the scope, develop the criteria to 30%, and then bid the project, it allows us to get the project to a letting earlier. This is being contemplated, for example, right now for the Brent Spence Bridge. Okay? And the reason for that again is that Ohio is in the lead on the project, on the Brent Spence Bridge project, and we agree with Ohio that this is a project that would lend itself to a design, build, delivery, or procurement method. Again, what it does is it allows, done properly, it allows us to get the project to a bid phase earlier. If we get it to a bidding phase earlier, then it can be built earlier, constructed earlier. As a reference, the Louisville Bridge, one of the two Louisville bridges that Indiana was responsible for one of the Louisville bridges, Kentucky was responsible for the other one. And Mike Hancock, who's here, Deputy Secretary today, was Secretary then, and he pushed that project forward. And that one was done on a design-build basis, our portion of. The Indiana portion was done on a P3 model, a private sector-led model. And so, and that project was delivered, I would say, and I think Mike would agree with me and others would agree, that project was delivered in exceptionally, at exceptionally efficient and quick speed. So, all that said, we're looking at this for the Brent Spence. We have also examined it on other projects where it's appropriate. It's not always appropriate because more often we have the time for developing the specifications fully, and we can go through it. And frankly, another issue in design build for civil projects is it's very costly to develop a bid when you have to take the 30% complete documents and perhaps estimate from those or do more engineering. So the engineering costs associated with design build are higher. So that also and that can influence, of course, then the competition. I realize I said a lot there, and forgive me for having maybe, what is it they say, the last thing a fish can describe is water, and I've just tried to describe water, I guess. It's only from having a bit of experience in that world that I can describe design build. I personally believe it's a very efficient model, but you've got to have the conditions for it.
And that's why I wanted you to kind of explain it, because it is one of those things that we have around here sometimes clear as mud, and so we like to.
But I will say the fact that you've given that the legislature, that the executive branch and the legislature together worked on giving authority to the cabinet and the flexibility to the cabinet really, really is valuable.
Yeah, and I think there's language in the budget about the mega projects being authorizing them, and then some smaller projects authorization for
Right.
Smaller projects. I don't know what that number is, but it is a limited number.
Right.
Of course, we talked about inflation. Something that's important to all of us here is and we get more calls about probably rather than new construction about the paving of the rural and secondary roads. Can you give us kind of a update how that's progressing and I guess how much money we're getting pushed out the door on that, because that is a important commodity.
Right. Hold just a second, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we're on, I have some notes here on revenue sharing, so let me share that. Even after the suspension of the 2-cent increase, local governments will receive more in revenue sharing this coming year, about $17 million more, according to the budget. And that is provided the motor fuels usage rates remain consistent, and there's every indication that they will. So that's an $8 million increase for the rural secondary road program, a $6.7 million increase for county road aid, and a $2.8 million increase for municipal road aid altogether. They will also receive the revenue sharing on schedule, with the first payment at the beginning of August. And moreover, Governor Beshear has committed that from the at the executive level, that he will propose to the next General Assembly to use money from the general fund surplus to restore revenue sharing to the level included in the budget, for the original budget for fiscal year 2023, which would take us to, I think, 371 million altogether.
Okay.
So the main theme there, I guess, if there's a headline, that the payments are on schedule.
Good.
And the commitment from the governor is to let's replenish the funds when it comes to January. Now, circumstances could change, but that's what the governor has said.
I know we talked about, you mentioned labor issues and,
Yes.
and availability. The pay raises went into effect July 1. Will that help?
We sure hope so, and the next one that we hope will come around will help even more. It is when Walmart advertises that they will pay truck drivers $110,000 a year, you can imagine what that represents to the rest of, to others, but especially to the public sector, because, this is nothing new to you all. But I can say it I remember a time when it was really tough to hire in the private sector anybody in the public sector because of the pension benefits. Well, that's not the same anymore. And so you asked me this question, Mr. Chairman, so I won't filibuster on you on it, I promise. But I will say a couple of things. But in the private sector, I'm told that an entry-level engineer is anywhere from, coming out of college, anywhere from $60,000 to $70,000 a year. And our offers are at somewhere around 40, I think. Isn't that right, Mike? Yeah, right. So you can doesn't take any kind of special effort to realize that we're at a disadvantage strategically and in that area, and it's very much the same with our frontline employees.
Well, this is not true across your entire
But we do
cabinet.
appreciate but they appreciate the effort that was made in the last session, for sure.
I was going to say, across the entire cabinet, a lot of your folks are working 40 hours a week, but those engineers are still at 37 and a half, and you could get them up to market value. Go ahead and give them work them 40 hours. They won't find a job in the private sector that works them. They'll be working 50 hours in the private sector to make that kind of money you're talking about. But if you change them to 40 hours a week, at least that's a 6.5% pay raise.
I know we've had
And
this
I'm good with
conversation.
it, okay? I'm good with it.
We've had this conversation, yes, sir.
So I just want to throw that out there when you talk about that. And one other thing on of course, we understand the criticism that we get for single bid contracts, and so and I guess it's good to hear your story about rebidding and that you are looking at that very seriously, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Yes, sir. You want me to jump over to, or
Absolutely.
over to the mega projects?
Yes, sir.
All right, okay. I don't want to infringe too much on y'all's time, so, all right. On the mega projects, that's basically, as we're defining those projects, it's three projects. It's the I-69 corridor, the approach, and the bridge in between Evansville and Henderson. The Brent Spence corridor project, including the bridge, and the Mountain Parkway. So, but before I go into all of those, I want to acknowledge and thank the legislature for enacting Governor Beshear's recommended budget of $250 million in general fund dollars for major transportation infrastructure projects. That really, that will genuinely help our competitiveness for the grants. And so there's genuine appreciation and recognition for that. These one-time funds will give us the flexibility to meet the state match requirements for federal grants we expect to secure without compromising the traditional road plan, the highway plan. Now, we're leaving no stone unturned to seek and secure federal funding to get us to the construction phase of these critical projects. So let me start with the Mountain Parkway. As all of you know, it serves as Eastern Kentucky's connection to the rest of the Commonwealth. And when I was asked by the governor to take this job, he made it clear that completing the Mountain Parkway was one of his top transportation priorities. That, along with the Brent Spence Bridge and I-69, it was clear on the very first meeting. And we are delivering. I'm proud to say this. I guess I should punctuate it. We are delivering on those commitments. The I-69 project the groundbreaking for it was held last week with a significant presence of folks. The bid of $158 million was actually under the engineer's estimate and significant and competitive with three other bids. Project is divided itself into 6 segments, and more than half of the parkway is complete or under construction. Now, this is the entire I-69. And I'm sorry, y'all forgive me. I was talking about the Mountain Parkway, and y'all should I was talking about the Mountain Parkway. Let me turn back to the Mountain Parkway. I got off on I-69 because I said I-69 last. Forgive me. We all know that the project is divided into 6 segments. More than half of the parkway is complete or under construction. And last August, we cut the ribbon. I was there, the governor was there, others were there. The senators, representatives were there on the 8.2-mile Morgan County segment. In 2020, we received a $55 million infra grant for the Wolfe County segment. And I'm pleased to announce that we awarded a $97 million contract this spring and plan to break ground in late summer. This 11-mile segment is currently scheduled for completion in 2027. The project runs from Mountain Parkway mile points 45.8 to 56.8 between Campton and Haleychwa. In addition to doubling the travel lanes, this construction project will modernize 2 interchanges, Kentucky 191, that's at the Campton exit 46, and Kentucky 110, Hazel Green exit 53. Now, the Wolfe County segment of the Parkway expansion is the final piece to making the current Parkway 4 lanes all the way from Winchester through Salyersville, and that's 78 continuous miles. It's the longest of all the segments so far. 3 construction segments are complete. 1 is currently under construction in Magoffin County. That 4.6-mile segment will be complete next year. So we are committed to seeing the Mountain Parkway expansion to completion, extending the parkway from Salyersville to Prestonsburg, which is another 14 total miles. Now let me jump to I-69, which I jumped over to. Okay. That's the Ohio River crossing in western Kentucky. Project is building a new bridge connecting Henderson and Evansville. It's been years in the making, as you know, and it's a major priority for the state. This future crossing is needed to close an obvious hole along the national I-69 corridor. Eventually, it will stretch from Mexico to Canada. The connection will open the door to new opportunities. Last year, Pratt Paper announced plans to build a $400 million plant in Henderson, bringing with it 320 good-paying jobs. And that's the kind of investment that we want to become the norm in Western Kentucky. 2 weeks ago, I mentioned it already, that the governor broke ground on the first section of the I-69 Ohio River crossing. We were pleased with the contractor that's doing the project. It is a design-build project, by the way. Got competitive bids for it, and a very, very competitive bids for it. There were all kinds of folks at the opening. I don't know if anybody here was there, but it was quite a turnout. And then after that, there was a joint Rotary and Lions Club meeting at which the governor spoke, and it was all about pretty much all about the enthusiasm associated with I-69. So I'm looking at my notes, Mr. Chairman, and I'm seeing that I'm talking a lot about this I-69 project, and I was planning on talking about the Brent Spence as well, but I'm also seeing that it's 11:02, and I want to be mindful of your time. The shorthand version of I-69 is it's underway. It's underway on schedule. We are working with Indiana to put together a plan where we may be able to accelerate the project. Right now, the plan calls for constructing the actual bridge in 2027. But both Indiana and Kentucky have a real interest in working, if we can, to accelerate the project. Now let me shift over to the Brent Spence. A lot of interest, of course, in the Brent Spence. It really is the poster child of the infrastructure bill. I can tell you a quick story that I was with the Secretary of Transportation along with about 5 other counterparts of mine, and we were going around the room introducing ourselves, and I had met Secretary Buttigieg when he was mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and I was mayor of Lexington, but I still needed to introduce myself, of course, like everybody else, and I said, well, Mr. Secretary, it's good to see you again, and I have just 3 words that I'd like to share with you: Brent Spence Bridge. And fortunately, that got a laugh from the other folks. Now, that's because we are making a focused effort in the first grant application, applications for the mega projects on the Brent Spence. We've applied for $1.66 billion in funding for Brent Spence, and that is out of a $3 billion project. This represents the first time that we've had what I would describe, and others have described, as a bona fide shot at getting this project done in the 15 or more years since it's been studied and plans have been developed on it. There's a clear and a visible path toward the funding that will enable us to build the project of this size. We also have the bipartisan commitments from both governors. Governors DeWine and Governor Beshear met in Covington to sign a memorandum, MOU, solidifying the plans, and that was in February. The states applied in May with more than 200 letters of support. Our federal delegation in full support of the project. We got letters from the leadership, of course, of the House and the Senate, Kentucky. And we got letters from the private sector. As many letters, according to my sources, that they have never gotten as many letters of support for any grant application at the U.S. Department of Transportation. I mentioned that we are also considering this project as a design-build delivery, and that is also an anticipation of the delivery of the project in a design-build basis, and with the environmental assessment work that's already been done, with where we stand with project development, working with Ohio and Kentucky, we should be on target. I won't say we should be. Well, it's the condition is when we get grant approval. I didn't say if, only I'll find some wood here somewhere. But if there's any project that has earned this federal support, it is the Brent Spence. So, with that in mind, we would be beginning aggressively on the design scope documents and be able to let the project mid-year next year and groundbreaking in the fall of 2023. That's the plan today. Okay. Oh, I do want to mention that we're working on a second grant application for the project, the Bridge Investment Act, or the Bridge Investment Program, and that will be coming in August. We experience. So, Mr. Chairman, that's my comments on the mega projects. We've got some questions. Happy to take them.
I'm sure we'll have some. I wanted to make a comment. You made several comments about the governor's commitment to this project. I want to put in a plug for the General Assembly's
absolutely, yes, sir.
A commitment to this project. Senator McDaniel's here. Senator McDaniel and Representative Petrie made sure that $250 million was available, plus some other general fund dollars to the road fund, and we're appreciative of that. Also, the General Assembly's commitment after the budget was finished and voted on and approved in the session, very late in the session. We received a call from Ron Rigney telling us that the administration had decided to make our chances better for the Bent Spence Bridge, to just apply for this first round just for the Bent Spence Bridge and not apply for Mountain Parkway and I-69. And they needed additional funds to do a section of the Mountain Parkway that was needed to be. And so our golden rule has always been not to reopen that budget, but because of our commitment to the Mountain Parkway, we did reopen the budget. We did another bill, a cleanup bill, and included that and some other projects in that to make sure that was taken care of. So we are committed to getting those done. When will you
genuinely appreciate that collaboration?
Well, thank you.
Genuinely, there was a lot of conversation there.
Well, a lot of cooperation.
A lot of cooperation, collaboration, and appreciate that.
Well, thank you, and it goes both ways. So thank you for. So you've applied for the Bent Spence Bridge
Right.
money. What type of match did we put up for that? I know there was conversations last year. We came up empty-handed because we didn't do any additional match, and some other states did 30% and 40%.
Right.
Matches to.
Well, that's where the $250 million is helping us in a major way. We're looking at our portion being right at 30% instead of 20%. Isn't that right, Mike? Yeah.
Well, you've learned less. We've learned less in the end, and
I don't know whether that was. I don't know if that was intentional on part of the federal government or that's what occurred.
Well,
but that is what occurred, is that we were outbid.
When you have a round of funding and we don't get a single one to the state of Kentucky, you have to look back and see what we're doing wrong.
Right.
So the I-69 and the Mountain Parkway, when do you see those being put forth for a grant proposal for them?
We're having these conversations. Literally, I've had 2 conversations with the Secretary of Highways transportation equivalent or my counterpart in Indiana in the last week. And we are in conversations, both Indiana's engineering staff and project management staff and our engineering and project management staff are in conversations together to see if we can accelerate And if we can accelerate, then we would be looking at grant applications. I think it's going to be tough to get something in this year, but next year for sure.
Okay, well
That's the Brent's. I'm sorry, that's I-69, right?
okay, and then
And of course, we've gotten an infra for Mountain Parkway, for the section underway, the Campton to Halichiwa section.
so will you have an additional section of Mountain Parkway proposal to submit for a federal grant in the foreseeable future?
Let me ask about that one. We're looking at it, right? Next year and the year after. Yeah, next year and the year after.
Okay, well that's good. That's all the questions I have, Mr. Secretary. If Senator McDaniel has a question,
Well, I didn't see Senator McDaniel. Hello,
He's over
Senator.
there.
I didn't
Try
see
to
you.
sneak in quietly, Mr.
Well,
Secretary.
I should have. When I talked Brent Spence Bridge, if I'd known you were over there, I would have saluted. Absolutely.
I thought maybe when you're talking cement and dump truck that
Well,
you know,
I could ask you about that too.
we both want to crawl under the table on that pricing right now. I know.
Yeah.
My only thought, Mr. Secretary, thank you for the presentation and the time. But I think we need to be very, very careful as we take general fund dollars and look at shifting them over to the road fund. First of all, just because is a matter of separation in those dollars, I think there's a certain budgetary discipline to not transfer them. But secondly, especially if we continue to see the advent of the electric vehicles, we have a real potential to obfuscate a decline in road fund revenues when we really need to understand the impact that it's having operationally on the roads. So I just, obviously we had a really odd situation this last budget cycle where that money was able to be transferred one to the other. But I think if we get into too many cycles in a row of that, as you know, we could really create a situation, particularly with the general public, where they aren't necessarily aware of the disproportionate impact of that shift as it relates to road maintenance and so on. So that was my only cautionary tale. But other than that,
Yes, sir.
thanks for the update.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That's speaking of money to the road fund. One thing that I've advocated, and Senator McDaniel always he kind of cringes when I say it, but I'll say it. Yeah, I know that. Is move the property tax on vehicles. That money now is going to the general fund, the state portion. I'd like to see that move to the road fund. So that's something I'd lobby for that would certainly help. Not a great deal, but it would certainly help. And look, he's cringing. But anyway, it doesn't hurt to lobby, does it, Senator McDaniel? Doesn't cost a thing. We'll see no further questions, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for being here today.
All right. You had me on for the Louisville toll bridge rate
Okay,
increase.
I'm
but
sorry.
If you want to go to Sarah Jackson,
No, that'll be another
No.
hour. So let's get this
did you
one.
hear that?
Let's get this one. Let's get this one taken care of. My apologies. Go ahead. Please
All right.
proceed.
Well, let me try to shrink wrap this. There's been I've used the word vigorous effort 3 times today, but there's been a vigorous effort to try to constrain, limit the increase in the toll increase for the Louisville bridges. A vigorous effort, starting with the transportation cabinet. The governor has had conversations with Governor Holcomb of Indiana. All of this has been reported. But I just want to say that that's been that's been the full intent, to try to limit the struggle that the folks are having. And the increase we felt that the increase of 8.3% was just too much. We were fine with our debt service and our maintenance obligations at a 2.5% increase, which has been the increase for some time now. So we appealed to Indiana. Of course, it's a bi-state agreement. And for the tolling body to make an adjustment outside of its business rules, and the business rules call for growth of the toll by the CPI, Consumer Price Index. The Consumer Price Index through May was 8.3%, and that's where that number then came from. But we knew through our analysis that we could certainly deal with our debt obligations and our maintenance and our operations needs with an increase of no more than 2.5%. Indiana didn't see it that way. Now, Indiana has a different set of circumstances. They've got private toll roads, and that was the position of Indiana. We are still advocating through KIPTIA, the Kentucky Infrastructure Authority, a public infrastructure authority, which has a governance role for the Louisville bridges. We are still advocating for a more modest increase of that increase, that 8.3%. So we're still advocating. We're not going to leave any stone unturned in continuing to advocate for a lower rate.
Mr.
Secretary, the General Assembly created that commission, and I guess it's a lesson learned that there was no cap on that increase, for percentage-wise.
Not to my knowledge.
Yeah,
but it was not anticipated. This is the thing that inflation at this level was not anticipated when the tolling body was created, and when the finances on the project were developed, financials.
Is that possible? Can Kentucky go back and just with our legislation on our behalf put a cap on the increases for the future, where the percentage of CPI to cap it?
Now that's over my pay grade, Mr. Chairman, but I would don't know that answer.
Because
You're saying could Kentucky do it unilaterally?
Well, like I said, we created that commission.
You created the KIPTIA, right? For the Kentucky side.
The Kentucky side.
Right. Yeah. To my knowledge, the agreement requires both states, and this is why we couldn't do it unilaterally. The tolling body can actually only meet if both states agree that the tolling body can meet. And the tolling body would have met or would meet provided we could get an agreement with Indiana.
Well, I guess emphasize that there's a commitment from the General Assembly to make sure that those tolls are reasonable, that we don't see that that happen again. But okay.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That's it.
It's the next hour now.
Okay. Thank
Sarah
you.
Jackson.
Sarah and Matt, thank you for being here today. And if you don't mind, introduce yourself and please proceed. We're talking about Real ID and other issues.
I'm Sarah Jackson, and I'm the Real ID Project Manager for the Cabinet. I'm Matthew Cole. I'm the Commissioner for the Department of Vehicle Regulation.
So thank you all for having us, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your comments about brevity, and you'd already told me to limit it to 5 minutes. So I'm going to do my best. But what I would like to do is hit a couple high points about where the program is now, because I think that feeds right into where Matt can share with you where we are budgetarily. So just to remind you all, House Bill 453 in 2020 created a new regional model for driver licensing, and it was in large part brought about by the Real ID, the federally mandated Real ID program. So the new regional model provided that the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet's Division of Driver Licensing assume all responsibilities associated with issuance of the standard and the Real IDs, transitioning Kentucky's 120 circuit court clerks off driver licensing and ID card issuance no later than June 30th of this year, 2022. And I'm sitting before you and pleased to report and proud of the team work that went into this. I'm pleased to report that the transportation assumed all issuance from the circuit clerks prior to June 30th of 2022. This has represented one of the largest statewide projects ever assumed by the Transportation Cabinet, with the majority of the time since the legislation's passage occurring during a pandemic. So while we are still very much a work in progress, I want to share just a couple points of where we are. We have 31 driver licensing regional offices open across the Commonwealth. I'm not going to list them. They're on a map on drive.ky.gov. I will tell you that we are constantly improving and making adjustments at all of those regional offices. They do tend to have some different needs driven by geographic and localities, et cetera. The most recent adjustment we've made, as you know, we offer appointments online and we also offer walk-ins. As you can imagine, the walk-ins fill up at a certain point each day. We now are offering online. Our newest feature of the appointment scheduler is a posted notification each day relative to each of the 31 offices that the walk-ins have filled up. So someone can check before they tend to want to go as a walk-in. They can probably check. That's something we can do at least to help offer greater services. Remote options, we continue to work very hard on remote options, allowing Kentuckians to skip a trip. I just want to tell you that 178,000 Kentuckians have skipped a trip to the licensing office and renewed their driver's license credentials online or their ID card since June of 2021. And more than 15,000 people have sent a mail-in renewal or an address change or replacement of a lost or stolen card. So that's a significant offering to the people that had never been available with the 120 circuit clerks. I want to mention our pop-up events. I hope you have heard about them in your areas. Our mobile driver licensing program is called the Pop-Up Program, and we visit each Kentucky county that doesn't host a regional office. By statute, we visit a certain number of times per year. It's based on county population. We started it in earnest in January, and we had our 100th pop-up visit in Robertson County on June 30th. I just want to tell you that we've served 2,500 local residents with the pop-up program so far, and we've held them so far in 81 counties. So we're on second and third and fourth visits. So we're getting great cooperations with the counties, with the libraries, with county judge executives, and it seems that the folks in the counties are very, very appreciative of this effort. So again, kudos to you all. That was part of the statute. That was part of what you created in 453. Finally, just a quick word about Real ID. The enforcement deadline for Real ID is May 3 of 2023. And I do want to share with you that Kentucky's Real ID adoption rate, meaning the percent of Kentuckians who are choosing to get a Real ID, is currently at 12.7%. Now, we only started in earnest in 2020, and the adoption rate stood at 1%. We are expecting in this state a final adoption rate of 35 to 45% of our population will adopt a form of real ID, will adopt a real ID credential. It's not as high as other states. I want to hit that right off and let you know, but if you all will remember, we were very, very late to the game. We were one of the last 3 or 4 states in the United States to enact in state law the federally mandated program. So I think that you're going to hear a lot. Our focus now for the next for the foreseeable future is going to be tightening up these 31 offices, seeing what more we can offer, what we can do to improve each of those offices, seeing if there is a need for further offices. We're going to continue that, and the second area of focus is going to be a much more intense Real ID focused public awareness campaign. I will share with you that TSA let us know that they're starting a big advertising campaign in the fall. So we're working very hard on our approach to that, and I think you're going to hear a whole lot of Real ID, because remember, if you want to fly, or if you want to go on a military base, or enter a power plant, or enter a federal building that currently requires a form of ID, you're going to need a form of Real ID. So this adoption rate, just so that you're aware, some people, first of all, we're a voluntary state. We do not require folks to get a Real ID. So we're never going to have 100% or even close to that for an adoption rate. And secondly, we need to remember that we had a pandemic, people weren't traveling, it wasn't on their mind. We also have had the enforcement deadline changed many, many times due to the pandemic, and also states coming on board late, et cetera. So there are lots of reasons that we will see a lot of growth, I think, in the Real IDs in the upcoming 9 months. And also, everybody may not need a Real ID by May 3rd. So I urge you, the only people will need an in-office visit to get a Real ID, and they should be planning it. And as I said, we're going to have a very intense focus campaign. So I'm going to turn over to Matt and let him share with you, now that you sort of know where we are in the big picture, I'll let him share a few of the budgetary points.
Thank you, Sarah. In review of our budget, we will finish fiscal year 22 with 74% of our overall driver license budget being expended. But I do want to point out that we are still growing into that budget. We are just now finalizing our latest regional office locations, with those costs coming on board now, and our team has hired a little over half of our permanent full-time staff. Fiscal year 23 will show our budget under more of a full load as this program continues to grow toward maturity. We will continue to keep this committee updated on any budgetary issues that arise, but we are tracking on a positive trajectory, and we anticipate no issues as we move forward. In regards to staffing and training, which has been a popular topic for everyone, now that our program is approaching full operational capacity, we'll continue to focus on increasing staffing and creating more robust training programs that will fine-tune our capabilities. We've had several select teams here created in our Frankfort office that we are now sending all across the state to our regional offices that will share process improvements and also enhance customer service procedures. For future technology, as we identify industry that it continues to evolve and change, KYTC will evolve with it. Later this year, we'll be launching our mobile driver's license program that will enable citizens to put a digital copy of their credential onto their smartphone wallets. This technology will offer more options for the citizens of the Commonwealth, and it will limit the information shared to only what's necessary within those transactions. TSA will be a leader in this technology, and many people will see this in transactions occurring at most commercial airports later this year as an option. We do envision eventually having an app that anyone could download to provide an update on driver status, remote renewal, uploading any necessary photos or documents, and keeping us in touch with all 3.1 million of our credential holders. Our KYTC IT team has begun the task of replacing our mainframe kidless database with a web-based solution that will be known as Kindle. This will produce a system that will be more user-friendly for our employees, and it will also lead to automation that will in turn expedite the services that we provide all Kentuckians. These items are on the horizon, are quickly approaching us. We will work diligently to bring these products to the state as they come available, as we find the best way to bring them to life. For driver testing, Kentucky State Police will still continue to lead the way with driver testing, and I'm glad to report that our partnership has grown even stronger through this transition. Major Day and Captain Johnson are great to work with and are consistently working on improvements for driver testing that will be a benefit to all new drivers. We've also confirmed that no KSP post will be shut down and will remain operational all across the state. As we move forward, we'll continue to solicit and receive input regarding all locations and production, adjusting when and where needed. One of our next steps will be to evaluate staffing levels at all regional offices to ensure we can provide the best customer experience possible. We will experience growing pains, but the good news is that the goals that you all share are the same goals that we have. We will continue to adjust and improve, and we look forward to keeping you informed along the way. And of course, as always, just let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you both. I certainly appreciate it. I want to first off commend both of you and the Secretary and for the availability and the response that we get from the Transportation Cabinet when there's an issue. And I'd encourage all the members here today to make sure that if they have an issue, especially with driver's license, and they're out there, it's an adjustment phase, and it's some tough times right now. We'll I know you all are working, and I talk about Sarah talking too much, but I've talked to her more in the last year than I've talked to anybody I can think of, and she's been very responsive on working on the issues that constituents are having with these regional offices, and I appreciate that. I want to emphasize too, and as you do your public service announcements, Real ID is not required in Kentucky.
Correct.
Only have to have it if you want to fly on a commercial flight, you want to visit a military base, or a federal courthouse. And you mentioned power plants. I didn't.
It's another. If you want to enter a power plant, that's
Ma'am,
the fourth.
I've never had that one on my list, but
No.
Those are mostly the restricted nuclear power plants, some of the more high-end things.
okay. And also, the passport will work. Your passport is a real ID. A military, if you have a military ID, that's considered a real ID. So there's a lot of things out there that will help folks as they transition through this. And I saw the percentage one time of how many Kentuckians have passports, and it's quite high.
Yeah.
And I tell folks that I don't have a real ID. I don't plan to get one. I'll use my passport card. And they asked me why, and I said, well, I voted against real ID, so I feel I don't want to be a hypocrite. I'm gonna do it that way, and so. But just, I think the knowledge to be able to talk to constituents when they call and let them know that there are options.
Absolutely.
Number one, they don't have to have it. Grandma doesn't have to have a real ID if she's not going to fly or go to a federal courthouse, or granddad. And online, it's available online. It's very simple. You can take your iPhone and a credit card and renew your driver's license. And you're forever young, Sarah. You use the same picture that's on your ID now, so you don't age much doing it that way. And they're also available by mail, and you can send cash.
Yes.
And I know you told me once, I might share with the committee about the mail-in option and the cash that you receive in the mail.
Oh, what
I was going to say, you might comment, you were amazed at the number of people that are
I
renewing.
really was. And I know that this again is, it's a regional thing, but I know that I hear from circuit clerks, they took cash for years for driver's licenses. That's how people paid in a lot of counties. They didn't use anything but cash. And we allowed cash with the mail-in option. We couldn't, can't figure it out obviously on an online renewal, but you could do it on the mail-in, and we do have, proper procedures for, handling the cash and accepting it, et cetera, but it's mounds of it. I mean, people prefer to send in cash, and I wouldn't send in cash. But I guess I'm from a different age or school or something. But anyway, it is amazing. We do get quite a few. I mean, and people prefer to do that. Those are for renewals or replacements.
And as a former retailer, I can tell you the cash economy is out there, and there's people just deal in cash. And there's, as you see, there's quite a few. And I appreciate you all making those changes. And again, if any of you have issues from constituents, like I said, they've been very responsive. And please call them, or you can call me to help with it. But we will get this done. The transition has not been exactly the way you would like to see it, but we've gotten through it with bumps and bruises. We didn't lose any arms and legs.
No.
The E-Town office, when's your completion schedule for that?
We're hoping to have that online this fall, as long as the procurement process goes. But from what's been proposed, it'll be additional parking, better layout. Just one of those lessons that we learned along the way. So it was one of our first offices, and going forward, we've applied that information with other offices to avoid those issues, and we'll get this one corrected as well.
But I think it shows that, that we are very willing to see where there have been design, mistakes in terms of we didn't anticipate this, we didn't work, and we've adjusted. And if we need to move a office location or we need to redesign a fit up, then we're going to do it. We're going to make this a superior model. It will be when it's finished. I'm confident.
You all have made the effort to make it user friendly, and I appreciate that.
Well, and thank you all. I mean, you all have made it stronger with your comments, and you really have, and your thoughts.
One final comment, and I'll be quiet, and I know we have some other questions. Vision test is scheduled for when next year?
2024.
July of 2024.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're ready for that before we transition into that, because that's going to be another big leap. Senator Turner has a question. Who else?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got kind of
First.
number of questions, if it's permissible. Who determines, well, first of all, I understand from what you're saying is all of the testing is going to be done out of that regional office that you all create.
KSP has decided to follow our regional model. They feel that's most efficient because they can pool their resources into one location. And what they've explained to us is they had so many examiners driving from county to county all the time that they were losing an effective amount of their day just due to travel, that some smaller counties would get Tuesday from 9 to 11, and you wouldn't get anything until next week. This way, by combining those resources, they can offer appointments all day long from 8 to 4 at these regional offices and get so many people more through daily. So we think it's a good plan that they've proposed, and we're excited to see where it goes.
Well, I don't believe it ever shoe fits the same size and every plan's the same and the best for the public especially, but who determines that? Is it the KSP or
Yes,
your office?
That is their program. Driver testing falls to them.
Well, Mr. Chairman, may I proceed?
Yes, sir. Please do.
Prior to coming here, I got the factual data for my county alone, and you all put the regional office in Bell County, which is 32 miles from the center of my town, and I hate to tell you that I live in one of those areas where people can drive 100 miles now to go to Bell County. And the statistics that they sent me, I'll read them to you. A review of the testing numbers in Harlan County over the 3 months reveals, because they had a local person that lives in Harlan that does the testing. She lives actually 10 miles east of Harlan at Kaywood, which now she'll drive an hour to work at Bell County, an hour back every day, saying that they had an average of 7 road tests per day and 10 written tests per day. In a regional setting, numbers are much higher. Now, I don't see how she or he can do much more than 17 written and driving tests a day, but I'm going to find out.
Sure. Great
I'm
question.
going to get them to
Major
send
Day.
me what they're doing down there.
Sure.
So now I'm going to have to send 17 people a day driving hundreds of miles, taking a parent with them to go get a test. She's driving by the courthouse where they've got a little old room that they've had. And I'm trying to figure out, we're saying that that's the better use of staff time and state resources, but it's a punishment to the public. Is there a way we can change that? But can you all fix a little regional office like it has been. I think she worked there 3 days a week.
Right.
And she had a full day. They were scheduled appointments. I've stayed on top of this.
Sure. We continue to evaluate our needs across the state, and if we decide that a new regional office needs to be established and if it's within the budget, we'll always consider that. Some of the things that we have to look at is, the size of the community, the amount of people and traffic that come to the community or go out of the community for it. So we don't set up a regional office for an individual county. We set them up to represent an entire region. So we need to make sure that where we put one benefits all the counties around it and not just a singular focus of a single county.
But my question is, and I'd like please answer, Mr. Chairman,
Please do.
is there any reason you can't continue to rent that office that was there in the court? It's in the judicial facility. I'll find out what it costs. The county owns it.
As an executive branch office, we have no authority over judicial branch offices.
They've been using it the whole time until she just put a sign up last week saying that she's going to now be going to Pineville. She's been there for probably 2 years.
KSP was invited there by the circuit clerk, so that was their agreement. We had no control over that.
Well, no, the county owns the courthouses, judicial centers, okay?
Right.
Circuit clerks just rents it.
I'm just saying that was an agreement that KSP and the county had there.
And is there any reason we can't continue that? I mean, I want to know if there's a legal reason, or do we need to do some statutory stuff?
I would defer that answer to KSP on their intention of how they'd like to handle that.
All right, so I will contact Captain, he put his name in here, to see if that can be done.
Absolutely. Yes.
Is there who pays the budget for that? Who would pay that?
KSP has their budget for driver testing.
Okay, but that comes through transportation dollars, or is it strictly?
ASP.
That's strictly KSP's budget.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator Turner, I've been working, and we've met with state police several occasions. We have a commitment from them to start to look at changes as we go forward. They've heard loud and clear about the concerns of parents and students having to commute a far distance, losing a day's work and a day of school to go. And they had to do it twice. My last meeting with them, they're going to be here, Morgan, September or October. Okay, and we'll have them in this committee too, hopefully, in September to discuss progress that they're making. One of the handicaps that they had, and Representative Fugit worked with me and helped me on this. They were very short of staff. And they needed additional 50 people to do testing to adequately cover the area, and so out of the transportation budget we did appropriate, I think it's $4 million in each year for the state police to hire additional staff. So once they need some time to get their staff up and going, and we will have conversations. I've asked for some way we could do online permit testing, try to figure out a way to save one trip. We've talked about state police following the mobile unit and doing it in the community when the mobile unit gets to because they're supposed to make every community twice, I think, in a calendar year. The mobile units are. We've talked about that. So we've and we've talked about state police coming to a community, and because we have there are honestly students that cannot make that trip. It's impossible for them to ever get to a regional office to do a driver's license. So we've talked to state police about on occasion to go to the school and have some students that of course you can probably only do 10 in a day. I don't know how many driver's tests you can do at a day's time. But we have had those conversations, and they've been very receptive to listening to us. And but it's going to take time. And I agree with it. And I think they agree, too, that, the way we're doing it needs to be changed. But one step at a time. The first step was to get them back up to staff, so they did have the proper staff. And so we'll continue with that. See, I think Representative Pearson, McPherson, excuse me.
Yeah.
You had a question.
Yeah, so very much thank you for your time. Thank you for your being willingness to be open-minded about all this. I've been hearing some I guess, talk or rumors about possibly partnering with the public libraries to do this. Is that a possibility, or is that something that's on your all's radar?
We have been partnering with some public libraries for the pop-up program. And we started out with the Commissioner of Department of Libraries, and we have had a lot of interest by libraries in local communities to host the pop-ups. We also reach out to the county judge executives. Some county judge executives have steered us straight to the libraries. But we've been partnering with them for those purposes, but we've also partnered with libraries by asking them to hand out mail-in forms, because some people don't have access to computers, by also perhaps even considering putting an icon on their computer so that someone can come in and renew online there. And so far, we've had quite a few libraries reach out to us, and we're continuing to spread that word, because I think that that's a great service, especially in areas where people do not have the access.
Especially people that never want a real ID.
Exactly,
But they would love to just have a place to go in their local
Yes.
county, and somebody that would kind of just give them some assurance of this is how we get it done.
Yes, sir.
And we have some great partners in the circuit clerks as well. They still continue to be a beacon for that process.
Will they do that? Are they? I mean, they've got a public computer. Do they not
That's
sitting
it.
out front already?
They'll set it down and have a shortcut there on that computer. They'll hand out mail-in forms. So really, it's a community effort. And we see community groups bringing people over to a regional office. So it's fantastic to see the creative results that can come up when people pull together.
So that, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The McGoffin circuit clerk, as an example, obviously it varies across the whole system, but the McGoffin circuit clerk tells that she designates still, even though she no longer issues licenses, she goes and sits with her laptop at her local library in Salyersville so many nights a month and helps the people in her community who want to learn how to renew online or whatever. We have it all over the spectrum with the help that we're receiving.
But they could set up this. The circuit clerks could do this out of their office still in the public area there.
Yes.
If they choose to, yes.
Yeah, we have it.
It doesn't even have to be circuit clerks. We just have leaders in the communities that'll do it. Anyone now can be, an advocate for this program and sit down people. So it could be done at libraries, adult centers.
Do you have to be trained to do that, or can
Absolutely
you just,
not. It's all online. It's just somebody that wants to help.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Good point.
The software for license renewal is very user friendly. It is. Any other questions? Okay, we have some over on the far side of the room.
I can go
Representative-
first.
Ladies
since I'm your
first. Okay.
favorite,
I didn't know who came in first.
Since I'm your favorite chairman.
Right. I got you.
I'm your favorite representative. Thank you so much for coming. Sarah, I always appreciate when you come. And I just want to thank you publicly. I know I had an issue in Hardin County, which I was glad you brought that up, Chairman, with a... Stop the static. Ken, did you do that to my microphone? Thank you for helping with that. And I think there was some education on my part too. They were having issues with the permit testing. And so you let me know about the KSP and was able to put my person that had an issue in contact with him that day. So thank you so much for that. I really am. I would not be doing my constituency. I would not be serving them well if I did not bring up my concerns with Hardin County.
Yes.
And so I would really like from you all, once we get in a better position with that, if you can just update us. I think that's something I get asked about a lot when I'm at the Dollar General or Walmart. And a lot of people are still really frustrated about it. And, there's nothing that we can do. I voted yes on it. And, after talking to my circuit clerk, it was the right move for Kentucky. A lot of times we don't like change. And so it's going to take us a while to get used to that. And but I respect their concerns, and so I do want to make sure that Hardin County is in a good position with that, because where I'm from in Grayson County, we do have to drive 35 minutes in order to go to the regional office. And so I do, whenever you all have the opportunity, when it gets in a better position, I would like updates. But I do appreciate just the open relationships that we have, that we can contact you when constituents do have problems, and then you all take that. I think that's something that's very important. in government. So thank you all for that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings up a very good point. We've had a lot of conversations about E-Town, Hardin County being the highest volume, or serving the most. There are more people in that region than any other region in the state, and we've had those conversations. So hopefully we'll see some relief there. Representative Pratt.
Thank you, Chairman. Question, I actually volunteer at the Amen House locally. The other day, they were telling me that Scott County gave it up, which they did not want to, and would love to have it back. I'll put in a plug for that. But homeless, how do they get an ID? They used to issue them. You took away everything they could to issue a homeless ID or an ID, so how do they do that now?
Those are still done in our regional offices.
Okay, more than likely they're not driving, and closest one is Lexington or Frankfort. That's a little bit of a problem there.
We've seen a lot of effort with community services where they're putting together vans that'll help people travel there. We have partnerships with groups in Lexington, Louisville, and Northern Kentucky that benefit this program. So if anyone has some concerns, they can point them toward us, and we'll be glad to get in a conversation with them and see what we can come up with.
This puts them in a real bad spot to get that. So yes, that's something you may want to take a look at. Thank you.
Representative Upchurch.
Representative Havern kind of covered a lot of what I was going to say, but Sarah, I appreciate the work that you've done and the conversations that you and I have had. One of the things that I think is just the simplest thing if someone wants to renew is just get on your smartphone. And you hear the excuse that not everybody has, computer access, but you find very few people across this Commonwealth who do not have a smartphone. They give them away free at intersections at Walmart. I think they're named after a former president. But with that being said, the ease and simplicity of going through this. I just renewed my uncle's 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks or a month ago. He walked in the office and he said, well, I've got to go to Somerset to get my driver's license. And I said, hang on a minute. I said, you got your driver's license and credit card with you? I got on my phone. 10 days later, he had his driver's license. I was in the office last week and having to make a copy of my father's driver's license, and just happened to look, and I said, Dad, your driver's license had expired. And he said, oh, no. And I said, yeah. So I just logged on and renewed his driver's license right then. And he'll get them in 2 weeks or 10 days or whatever. So the simplicity that you all have put in place and the resistance of the public to change, I think, is the real problem that we have. It's so simple, and we've just got to embrace the simplicity. The real ID, I think, we've got some issues there, but just the renewal of your regular driver's license, it is so simple. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
One thing that the General Assembly did in this year's session that went into effect July 1, if your license now expires, you have up to 5 years to renew it without going through the testing again. And that is a major improvement, because I think before, if it was expired a year or 2 years, you had to go through the 1 year. You had to go through the permit testing. You had to get a driver's permit. And you had to go back and take a driver's test.
Just written in vision.
Just written in vision, didn't
For
have
1
to do
year.
the test?
Anything over 5 years, then you would have started at the permit phase.
Okay. Well, but so anyway, it's a major improvement, and that's very, very common sense legislation. Any other questions? You all have any final remarks?
Now, I just want to thank I want to thank all of you all for your support and help. We've had lots of rough days and we've had some good days, but I really, when you think of what you all did last session, upping the state police budget, the non-testing if you're expired, and when you look at what Representative Upchurch said about the online renewal and the mail-in, Kentuckians have more choices. We have brought driver licensing into beyond this century. There are more options now, And it is a big sea change. And I think once they sit back and realize that they can do it from their phone, or they can go to their local library, or they can still renew even if they're expired, once they realize all of these options that are out there for them, we're going to see a lot less traffic in our offices. And I don't doubt that in years to come, somebody is going to be at this table letting you all know we may not need 31 or 32 or 35 offices. So that's all I have to say. We're not anywhere near that yet, but I just, I want you to know we're trying very hard to serve all Kentuckians at every level.
Well, thank you all again for your cooperation and availability. Like I said, we'll continue to improve and as we go forward. And I agree with Sarah. That's one of these days that we'll have that conversation that regional offices won't be a necessity for as many as we have. If we can work out the driver's testing part of it, everything else I think will fall into place. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn? We are adjourned.
Actually, I will tell